It's podcadzo.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, dude, I can hear you. Quiet down, for the love of God. Nice sumac shirt.
Thanks, bro. I figured one of us has to fucking represent.
I could not look more like a dude unqualified to talk about metal right now. I realize that, right?
Bro, you look like you came straight out of a J. Crew catalog.
This is literally a J. Crew shirt.
Yeah,
And,
you don't gotta tell me.
Wearing khakis.
Yeah, of course you're wearing khakis.
Yeah.
Well,
so you wanted to talk about ISIS specifically.
Yeah. Why did we? I guess I kind of thought it'd be slightly worthwhile because we're trying to do these in somewhat of an order that makes sense, things that connect to each other in a certain way. So we were originally talking about the idea of doing 90s metal. That was what we wanted, kind of the original idea of the
because I think that came
about.
up in the grunge episode, the first.
For sure. And there's a lot of connection, obviously, between, I would say, grunge and 90s metal, and even some of the like desert rock and shit that we talked about definitely can be tied to that 90s metal too. So yeah, we wanted to talk about that. You wanted to talk about Pantera specifically. And Metallica. I think we both wanted to mention Metallica. That was kind of where we were in the middle. And then, yeah, your side of things was wanting to handle Pantera. And then I said, well, if you're going to do Pantera, I think the only logical thing for me to do is ISIS. And that's not really super logical, actually. I just really wanted to talk about ISIS.
I think it was just like, oh, Colin kind of weirdly likes Pantera. I want to talk about a band I like too, and I like ISIS.
Yes, and I honestly, being a huge metal fan, I don't necessarily like 90s metal. So I was thinking maybe you could talk about Pantera and explain why you think Pantera is good.
I was thinking back today why I even started listening to Pantera like a month or two ago, whenever it was, in the first place. And it actually ties nicely back to our grunge episode, because it was actually Dave Grohl's autobiography that led me to it. I was reading his book, and he has a chapter about him and Taylor Hawkins trying to visit Pantera's strip club in Texas. They opened up a strip club, and Dave and Taylor were doing like a cross-country trip and decided to take a little detour and drive to Texas. But then Dave Grohl lost his wallet somewhere along the way. Right when they were getting to the strip club, he's like, oh shit, man, I left my wallet like 18 hours back or whatever. They're like, let's just try to get in without it. And so they went to the bouncer and were like, hey, we're friends with the band. And the bouncer was like, everyone here is friends with the band. And so they didn't get in. So that was the story in Dave Grohl's book. But he went on afterwards to, or maybe before, talking about just how much he loved Pantera and how epic they were. And that one time Foo Fighters played with Pantera and it was crazy. And so I was reading all his praise for Pantera. I was like, I guess I've never like really listened to Pantera. So the next day I was at the gym and was, I'm always looking for new pump up music, new music to do my Kegel exercises too.
Definitely.
And I was getting on the stair stepper, getting ready to work out my little buns. And I was like, I need some good pump up music. And Pantera popped in my head. And I remembered, like, I'd probably listened to Vulgar Display of Power before, and I remembered it being kind of like an important album and one that was like critically acclaimed. So I saw that on there and I threw it on. And it's a powerful album, dude. And I would say very good songwriting. It's well produced. I think the lyrics are powerful, and there's like a sense of completeness and cohesion to the whole record. And I was thoroughly impressed. So I went back and listened to their first album, which is called Cowboys from Hell, which was kind of that one was 1989, I think it came out in. So that was still kind of in the 80s period of metal, and you can definitely hear it. It's got like its glam influences, especially in the vocal style. But it's kind of interesting listening to that one and then Vulgar Display of Power, because Vulgar Display of Power is almost more like a hardcore album rather than like 80s glam. Like just the vocal style is intense and a lot of guttural screams, and musically though it's still pretty similar. It's just, I think, is the singer of Pantera Phil Anselmo or something like that? I should look this up.
I got you.
Yes, Phil Anselmo. I was right. Yeah, so what really changed between the first record and the second record, I think, was Phil Anselmo's vocal style. And but I'm just kind of, I'm just throwing shit out there. I honestly don't know a lot about Pantera and have not done a lot of research since then. The only thing I knew about Pantera going into all this that everyone knows about Pantera is Dimebag Darrell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
And for our listeners, real quick, sorry, Julian, I'll just explain that Dimebag Darrell is famous because, he was a shredder guitar player and was ultimately murdered on stage. In 2004, he was assassinated. He was shot in the head while ripping a guitar solo. Pretty tragic. Rest in peace, Dimebag.
Yeah.
You were a ripper.
Definitely a huge ripper.
I feel like now getting a little more familiar with Dimebag Darrell, and just like I've been looking at pictures of him, even watched a few Pantera interviews, I realized how many of the dudes like that I grew up with or knew who were older, who were really into metal, just wanted to be Dimebag Darrell so much. Like I've seen more Dimebag Darrell imitators than probably anybody else in the metal space.
Definitely, yeah. He influenced a fuckload of, specifically, I would say, guitar players. But yeah, overall, just the metal scene. I think Cowboys from Hell was like the record that ultimately made the metal community say like, oh shit, these guys are like heavy as fuck. And that was because of Dimebag Darrell. I think he really pushed that change to like trying to find groove still, but be like a thrash metal band as opposed to like a glam metal band.
Yeah. And it's cool that they're from Texas. It made me think we should one day do an episode of like weird bands from Texas.
Weird bands from Texas.
You wouldn't expect to be from Texas who were.
Or just weird bands that kind of reside in Texas and work out of Texas. I think there's kind of both.
Mm-hmm. But now Texas has its thing with like the Austin music scene, and it's like,
and I guess a lot of like actors and stand-up comedians are kind of moving to Texas as well.
Yeah, it's because of taxes, I think. Because
of taxes, and I mean, they claim it's because they want to be somewhere that's a bit more peaceful and a bit more slow-moving. But I think it's also, Texas is a bit of a tax haven as well.
I really only wanted to say that Vulgar Display of Power is a pretty sick album to do squats to.
Yeah, so I think I will say, because also I kind of gave you shit when you told me you were starting to get into Pantera, and I thought it was funny.
So it's a funny band to be.
I thought it was funny because they're cheesy. They weren't always cheesy, but I just don't think they necessarily aged well, and I think it's just because metal has evolved like super rapidly. It hasn't really been around. I mean, it's been around for a minute, but there's been a lot of subgenres of metal that have only recently appeared, I would say, since like the 2000s to now. And so, I think they just kind of sound like older, slightly more commercial metal. But the album Vulgar Display of Power is very, very good. I think it does hold up in the sense that it is still very heavy. There's still a lot of like true riffage on it. And it is a groove metal record in the sense that it'll make you like kind of want to dance. It'll make you kind of want to get into like a mosh pit or something. It's not purely thrash in the sense where it's just like you can't really find what's going on necessarily. And it doesn't change super rapidly. I think the songs are all pretty laid out, pretty straightforward for the most part. So I mean, it's a great record. I think it's interesting. I guess with the Dave Grohl thing, it makes sense that you just wanted to kind of be like, well, what is all the fuss about?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting that Pantera is the band that you chose to dive into as far as that vein of metal, because there's a lot of other mainstream metal and there's a lot of other just like more modern, more progressive metal that I feel like maybe you would enjoy more, but it's hard to know those things. Sometimes you just want to listen to a thrash record. Sometimes that's what the heart wants.
Exactly. It's what the heart desires. And who am I to deny it? So before we get into ISIS, let's talk a little bit about Metallica.
Yeah, definitely.
And Metallica, I've listened to a lot of Metallica over the years, but they weren't a band I like took seriously. Or I shouldn't say seriously, that sounds so douchey, but like a band that I like actually like listened to seriously or like considered their place in music or anything. And until a few years ago. And I don't know why, I just, just popped in my head like I should actually spend some time with like Metallica and try to understand the records and stuff. And I remain a big fan. I have all of their albums downloaded on my phone whenever it comes on in the car. I'm psyched and I play it. Also great workout music. If you burn out, vulgar display of power, throw on Ride the Lightning or something like that. But what really got me into the trenches with Metallica was the documentary Some Kind of Monster, which I watched several years ago. And it is incredible how insane and unself-aware and Spinal Tap-esque that documentary is. And you've never seen more unlikable guys try to write music together. It's just horrible. But for some reason, it endears you to them even more in a bizarre way. So yeah, has been my recent experience with Metallica. But like I said before, then you can't avoid Metallica pop culture. They were they had the highest grossing tours of any band in the 90s. They, Black, the Black album, broke, I think, all kinds of records for sales. I'd have to look that up, but it was obviously a hugely influential album. But it's insane to watch like Metallica concert footage from the 90s and see that. And yeah, they were, it's just crazy how much Metallica dominated music in the 90s.
Yeah, I think I have a very similar history with Metallica in the sense that I did not like them for a very long time, and I still don't really care for a chunk of their discography on like kind of both sides. I like a lot of what happens in the middle of their careers, but I'm not a huge fan of the beginning or the end. And I gotta say, not like as a drummer or like as a musician, but just as a person, I think that Lars Ulrich is like hands down like probably the worst major musician that exists. Like,
yeah,
people always hate on like Meg White or like, I don't know, Ringo Starr. People have hated on a lot of like good drummers over time for being like not technically amazing. But I feel like Lars Ulrich has just never actually really given a fuck about the parts he's playing. It's always just trying to play what most fits in to what the guitars and the bass is doing. There's no like identity to any of the drums, especially, I mean, in his performance, but also in the way they're mixed throughout Metallica's career. I think they've taken very few chances on the drums. And like, I will say, obviously the snare drum on Saint Anger is like an iconic snare sound. Drummers who are listening to this will hopefully know what I'm talking about, but I think the snare on Saint Anger is like the one really notable drum risk that has ever been taken in Lars's career that people talk about, and that is like relatively iconic in itself. But
is that right? You said Saint Anger is your favorite album?
Honestly, it is. Like, I like Saint Anger the most. I don't know if it's my favorite, honestly, but it's up there for like the one I enjoy listening to the most, purely because it has unique characteristics to the mixes. It's like you're listening to a Metallica album, but it sounds different in the way that they approach the mixes and the production. And the snare on it is fucking wild. It's like actually an instrument that I think makes a statement on the record and commands attention, whereas every other performance on like all of the other Metallica records, in my opinion, the drums do the opposite of that. They're just like, don't pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm only here to bolster what everyone else is doing. And I think that approach is largely why I really have never fucked with Metallica super hard, because the rest of it, like, especially since Rob Trujillo has joined back, that was like 2002 or 2003?
Yeah, early 2000s.
Ever since he's joined, I feel like I've really enjoyed the performance of him and Kirk Hammett. And even though I think a lot of what Kirk Hammett writes is like ultimately kind of cheesy or like slightly just commercial, I think he has good intentions behind the parts that he tries to write, and he like stands by the parts that he tries to write. And I feel the same way about Hetfield. Like, I think Hetfield's obviously not like the most amazing guitar player of all time, but I think he has a unique character behind his instrument where you can tell that he puts his whole self into his instrument. So I those dudes are great, and I think that they do great things, and I really appreciate like that even though they've been like a commercial metal band for their whole career essentially, that they have stepped outside of their comfort zone a few times and tried some different things. But yeah, Lars just kind of fucking ruins all of it for me, to be honest. And then that paired with the fact that Metallica is just like almost like a corporate entity outside of being a band. Like, when you go listen to their albums, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so this sounds like a metal album, it sounds like music. But when you're not like in that headspace listening to the music, I personally can kind of get caught up in the just Metallica universe of, they have a whiskey, they have all these documentaries, they have all these business ventures, like they have world tours, like and it's like they have this fan base that's fucking crazy. Like, all of that can turn me off from really wanting to like embrace their music. But I think Garage Inc. is a fucking incredible record. It's like almost 2 hours long, and I can listen to pretty much the whole thing without getting bored. And I think it has a lot of like rawness of emotion and production, and like they definitely kind of let more hang out on that one on like an emotional level. And I think Saint Anger's great because again, they take a lot of chances on it, and they try to push some boundaries of especially like early 2000s metal. And I think they're also reacting to some things that they're hearing, like, obviously Tool is happening at this time. ISIS is happening at this time. You have bands like Cave-In. And they're all listening to early and middle 90s Metallica and reacting to that. And then I think you hear Metallica reacting to them, reacting to early Metallica on albums like Saint Anger. I think that's pretty much like where my passion lies for Metallica, is with those two albums. But the rest, like the Black Album, I like And Justice for All. I won't like necessarily throw them on, but if it comes on, I'm not gonna like change it 100% of the time. I'll listen to it like probably 60% of the time. I also had a friend in high school who really loved Metallica and it was all he listened to. And so that kind of, in a way, made me want to be like, listen, man, there's other stuff out there too that's good.
I knew dudes like that. And not saying anything about your friend, but a lot of them were total assholes.
No, I mean, he wasn't and isn't an asshole in any way, but I think that, like, I don't know, in some way that a lot of dudes that are like super chill, don't really emote outwardly a lot, they wind up listening to like heavy music because that's their chance to be like, I'm fucking pissed. But Metallica's never made me feel that way. It always just makes me feel kind of bummed out because I'm always just like, man, this sounds half-assed as fuck to me.
Yeah.
And it's usually just because of the drums.
What is the snare sound on Saint Anger is like real kind of raw, right? And
it's like my best definition of what that snare sound is like if you took something like super metallic, I don't want to say like a trash can lid because it's not trashy sounding, it's super crisp. But if you took like just a giant, like if you took a giant piece of steel and just laid it out on like an X stand or something and then just whacked it with a hammer right in the middle, it'd be like ding, like and like that's almost what the snare is like on that record. It's super high and tight and crisp. And like, I think it might be mixed louder than like anything else that's on the record. Like, I think it sits where vocal sits as far as like presence in the mix. There's times when it's like definitely the loudest thing that's happening. And Lars isn't doing anything intricate on it because obviously he's not capable of doing anything that requires thought, but he whacks it super hard, super consistently throughout all the tracks, and it's very satisfying in that way. It's almost like, I mean, we talked about how good the snare sounds are on Octung Baby a while ago, and it's almost kind of like the Metallica version of the Octung Baby snare, where it's just every song is just like ding, ding, ding. There's that percussive ass, just very high and tight snare.
I'll have to listen again because I'm not the biggest Saint Anger fan, but I listened to it after I watched Some Kind of Monster because that's what that movie documents the making of.
And that album's a lot to take on. And I think since you talked about Some Kind of Monster, I think the reasons why there's so much tension throughout that documentary is just because they're making something that's so like volatile, if you will. It's like they have no idea if it's going to work out. And I think that album commercially does not work out very well at first. Like the critics aren't huge fans, if I remember correctly. I think the Metallica fan base is kind of just like, what the fuck? And now it's kind of looked back on as like one of those albums that we all misjudged slightly. It was a little bit ahead of its time.
Well, I liked watching the movie and then listening to it because it added a lot of color and it sounds how you would think it would from watching the movie, because they like, it seems like almost none of it came easily. They were like trudging through mud the entire time. It was an uphill battle. They did not want to work together. They were having trouble coming up with ideas, but you know, it was kind of, they were forced by, you know, some mechanism to write and record and put out an album. And so they just had to like grit their teeth through it. And I think that you hear that in the music when you listen to it.
Yeah. I mean,
and
we're talking about, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we're talking about a time in music history when labels were literally signing bands to like 5 albums. Like, hey, you guys are going to do 5 albums. There's going to be one every 2 years. That's 10 years of your life that you've signed. The industry is kind of pivoting away from that now. And you see a lot of people that are doing shit a lot more DIY. But I think, Metallica found themselves in a situation like that where they were just bound to a label and they didn't necessarily want the creative output, but it was there. They had to do it.
We've spent way too much time on Pantera and Metallica. We haven't gotten into what you want to talk about, what I really want to hear about, which is ISIS.
I think all this is a good lead up point to what I think really matters in the 90s and 2000s, which is ISIS. And to me,
So let me start with a question for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Why do you like ISIS so much?
I think the reason why I like them so much is truly just because it's like the most like grandiose and like epic, just like kind of jaw-dropping version of metal that I know of. It has elements of it where it is super heavy, like just ungodly heavy, and they can unleash like a lot of very serious emotion just in the intensity of the heaviness. But then a lot of the times what they tend to do is go straight from like something super heavy into like something very, very open and just large and beautiful. And I think me being a musician, the one thing I've always said and wanted to try to stay true to is just the idea of like you'll only like make shit that you want to make. It doesn't really matter what the expectations are. I feel like ISIS is kind of like a band that really fully encompasses that attitude. They just always did exactly what they wanted to do. One, their fan base wanted them to lean further into like heaviness and sludginess. They chose to lean more into melody and like atmosphere. And when their fan base kind of wanted them to stick with that, they decided to go backwards slightly and like incorporate multiple elements of like their full career into an album. And I think another important thing is they just also knew when to call it quits, because obviously they're no longer together and they broke up of their like own account just because they felt like they were at the end of their creative road with ISIS. They didn't think that there was anything else that they could do in that world that would be like new and fresh and different. And I think that that takes the most foresight of like any part of being an artist, is knowing when you're like beating a dead horse or putting something in the ground that no one really wants anymore. And
yeah, maybe so, but a way cooler way to end your musical career is just ruining your relationship with your brother to the point where you can't even be in the same room anymore, like Oasis did.
Yeah, what happened to Cam, by the way?
Yeah, he was on this podcast, and I think was playing keys with us for a little bit too.
Yeah, what happened to that guy?
I destroyed our relationship way too early. Before we even put out any music.
You weren't able to hit the road or anything?
Nah, I messed up the timing so fucking bad, dude. And Cam, I'm sorry. No, I'm just joking. Cam couldn't handle the heat, dude.
Cam had to get out of the kitchen because he couldn't handle the heat.
He could not handle the heat.
Just kidding, Cam. I love you. Anyway, yeah. So I think basically to sum up ISIS and my love for them, I think they're like the most perfect version of a progressive metal band. And I think progressive metal happens to probably be my favorite genre. So I think those two things just kind of add up where it's like, oh, I love this thing and they're the best at making this thing. I love that band. And I think there's not a single thing that they've ever done that I disagree with or wish they would have done differently, whether it's a transition track or like a production choice or a vocal technique. No matter what it is,
the vocal techniques
I stand
funky.
by 100% of it, which like even like my other favorite bands like Radiohead and like Thrice, all those bands that I like love, U2, Coldplay. I mean, there's a lot of problems that I have with all those bands and some of the choices they've made. But with ISIS, it's like, I literally can't think of a single one. I love every single one of their songs. I love every single one of their albums. I love every single thing that Aaron Turner has done, like post ISIS. I literally just think he's never fucked up, and I think that I can't say that about anybody else. So, yeah.
Well, all of that makes this all the more difficult to say. Please don't take this personally. I found a lot of their music a little boring. And
yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah. And I'm not dissing the musicianship at all. And they're like a lot of it I found very moving and impressive. And I do want to spend more time with them and listen to them a little more seriously. But I found myself just kind of going in and out during songs. And yeah, just I don't know. A lot had trouble following it. But all that being said, I definitely get the appeal, and I do want to spend more time with them.
I think it was kind of a slow burn intro for me. Like at first, when I first really became fully aware of them and all their full discography, there's certain albums that I couldn't really touch for like a long time, and there were certain parts of albums that I did like that I didn't really fully understand yet. And I think that just the persistence in me like listening to it and my curiosity growing around the genre of metal at the time, because I was also like getting very, very curious about just metal as a whole. All those things kind of led me to just eventually really fully maybe not understand what's happening, because I guess obviously you understand what's happening right now. But it just gave me time to like contextualize all of it more. I think in a lot of ways, like what I've said to people that like aren't metal fans or even aren't just like ISIS fans, I've pitched this argument to our friend JJ too, is that ISIS is pretty much a jam band. Like in the Absence of Truth and Wavering Radiant and even elements of like their album Panopticon, they're pretty much just like very large, very expansive jam sections where they take
they're all
one
like
idea,
7-minute songs at least.
Yeah. They take one idea and they like recapitulate it over and over and over. And they just expand on that idea to like the fullest possible potential. I feel like they exhaust every idea that they have within a song. And they go very like full on with their transition tracks and their intros and their outros. Like everything's very drawn out. Mm-hmm. And that ultimately, I think, is Aaron Turner's influence and his desire to create something that's a bit more, eventually winds up being a bit more like drone music. But at the time, it is coming out as just like, yeah, very melodic, very instrumental based, like just wandering kind of like stream of consciousness music. Which, yeah, I personally, I happen to like love music that's like that. That's why In the Absence of Truth, I think, is like my favorite ISIS album. And a lot of ISIS fans, that's their least favorite album. But I think it's my favorite just because it really does like, it pushes my brain in so many different directions every time I listen to it. Like it makes me feel super hopeful. It makes me feel kind of pensive at times. It makes me feel like super grateful at other times. There's obviously like parts where it's heavy, but overall I just feel like it's a very just like truly beautiful, beautiful record. And like, I don't know, I have a lot of kind of cheesy memories with that album in my head too. So that all helps me kind of love it even more. Like, you know, driving in Colorado, like down a mountain pass with like Wrists of Kings playing, and it's just like super huge and beautiful. And I'm just like soaking up my world, and the song's just like about enjoying like the beauty of nature and all that shit. And it's just kind of like, wow, like this is awesome. This is great.
That's what I need to do. I need to throw them on in the car. That makes sense. So I listened to Celestial and Oceanic. First off, I just started going chronologically, and then you told me to listen to In Absence of Truth. So I skipped ahead to that one. And, I need to give it another listen and listen more seriously. So this is not a fair judgment at all, but I think I enjoyed the stuff I heard on Celestial a little bit more.
Celestial's definitely like, I would say, the easiest to listen to, not in the sense that like production wise, it's like smooth and polished, because it's not. It's like in my notes, and I had my friend Will write these notes with me because he is also like a very, very big ISIS fan. But essentially, it's like caveman music is what we always have called it. Like Celestial really is just like taking caveman anger and recording it. It's just every song is just like fucking 11 out of 10 on the anxiety and the anger scale. But from like a songwriting approach, I think it's like the easiest to listen to because it's like, here's a huge riff, and then here's another huge riff, and then here's an outro, and then here's the next song, and there's a slight intro, and then here's a huge riff, and here's a huge riff. And then, that's like the whole album pretty much. And then Absence of Truth is like, you get into the first song, and it's like, okay, here's a almost 4 minute long intro that has like literally nothing to do with the rest of the song. And then you get into the beginning of the song and it's like a very slow ramp up. It's basically, one part that just builds over intensity for the whole song until the outro riff. And then you have one outro riff and then the song's over. But it's like, almost an 8 minute long song. So it's kind of like, I think that is the beginning of their shift to explore like truly progressive and like very melodic music. And I think for me, a lot of the hidden gems on the record are just super hidden guitar melodies that are like underneath the repetitive parts of the song, where they're just finding different ways to like personify different chords or even just expand on an idea in, like I said, like as many ways as they possibly can. And I think obviously another thing that I really look for in bands that I enjoy is just like progression. I think that like it can be said that no two of the ISIS records really do sound super similar. Like even though Celestial and Oceanic are both like heavy as fuck caveman music records, like they approach the production on the records completely differently. And the transition tracks on the two records wind up being nothing the same. The themes on the record, like obviously it's not like you can understand what the dude's saying, but the themes on the record are completely different. I think there's just huge shifts like per record, which keeps me very invested as a listener, like from start to finish.
Thank God they disbanded before the terrorist group came to prominence.
I think it was kind of a thing like around the end of their career, and they came back and played a couple like reunion shows, and they went under the name Celestial when they came back, because I think ISIS, the terror group, had kind of the Islamic State.
They co-opted that one.
Had kind of taken over that moniker at that point.
Add that to the list of things those douchebags have ruined. God damn it, dude! I hate ISIS so much. I'm so fired up right now. I guess I read caveman music, excuse me, in your notes, and liked that description a lot for the first two albums.
Totally.
So I hear that. Sorry, before I forget, you brought up not being able to understand what the dude is saying vocally. And I did want to bring that up to you, like what the intention is with the vocal style and particularly how they mix the vocal. It's like something that kept triggering me while listening to them is like the vocal is like frustratingly low but present
because
in the mix.
You're
it's like, oh, I hate that.
You're like a perfectionist in that sense. I think with mixes, it's like everything has to be where it should be, essentially. So I guess full backstory on this, kind of. I'll be quick about it, but ISIS formed because they were just jamming, doing experimental sessions and recording them. And at the time, it was not the people that wound up being in ISIS, but two of the dudes, Aaron Harris and Aaron Turner, the drummer and the frontman, and then the other guy who played guitar, Bryant Clifford Meyer. They were all kind of like fighting about who should do vocals because no one wanted to do vocals on the records. I think once they decided, okay, we're going to be this band, we're going to release albums, like we're going to be in the scene, that's when they realized like, oh, fuck, we need someone to sing. And no one wanted to do it. And Aaron Turner kind of got forced into it. And I think at that point, he had absolutely no training or background or history of being a singer whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not confident in his approach or like his stylistic choices, especially on Celestial. And he didn't want the vocals to be the most present part of the song because he knew the vocals weren't going to be carrying any of the melodies. They weren't going to be necessarily contributing to the overall quality of the song. They were just kind of there because you needed to have someone doing screaming to kind of give that extra anger and emotion to the songs.
Yeah, I see the screaming, but one of my problems was so much of the time it didn't feel like the vocals were adding anything, that they were just distracting from the music. It's like, why have that there?
And I think in some ways Aaron Turner would probably agree with the sentimentality of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that's kind of why he did it. I think he was trying to be a lot more unconventional than all the other metal vocalists at the time. And I think he was trying to use his voice specifically in very unconventional ways. He was trying to do uncomfortable things with it and make it feel like a disturbing presence within the songs. And in all fairness, or not in all fairness, but just, you know, in the way that music is beautiful is that it's different for everybody. Mm-hmm. That's like why I love Aaron Turner. And that's why I continue to love Aaron Turner on all of his post-ISIS bands, is because he will use his voice in the most unconventional ways possible. And he'll throw it and he'll like talk scream and he'll sing scream. And I think he'll just always do what's unexpected at the right times. And a lot of my favorite vocalists have since then followed down that path. I feel like I don't know the dude's name, unfortunately, but the guy from Black Midi, like, I feel like he uses his voice in a lot of the same ways that Aaron Turner was using his voice on earlier ISIS records, where it's just like he's intentionally trying to do things that make the overall like smoothness or comfortableness of the mix like be less so. Mm-hmm. And I think with ISIS in particular, really it starts out as the idea of, oh, I don't want to be the singer. I don't want to be the guy who has to be like the front man of the group. And then it really kind of just develops into, well, let's see how far I can take this, because his vocals are never the most present thing in the mix. Even all the way through their career, the vocals are pretty quiet. But I think he gets to a point where he tries to actually sing some stuff, that he tries to carry some real melody, and he tries to develop his scream, I think, like continuously throughout their career, and even now, to where it's not just like a conventional throat scream or, you know, gut scream, whatever it might be. It's not something that like it's not a sound that anyone can make. It's like a sound that only Aaron Turner makes, and you literally know it's Aaron Turner when you hear it. Like I have a buddy, his name's also Colin, and he loves a band named Full of Hell, and Full of Hell collaborates with Aaron Turner. And, you know, Colin had never heard of ISIS, but he had been listening to Aaron Turner screams the whole time that he had been listening to those Full of Hell collaborations. And then I put on ISIS in the car and Aaron Turner starts screaming, and Colin's like, oh, fuck, I know that voice. Like, and 99% of the time, if someone in metal is screaming, it all sounds the fucking same. I don't care what you say. Oh, this screamer is so unique. They do things so... No, they fucking don't. Like, really, Aaron Turner, I think, is like the most unique screamer probably in the whole genre so far. And he's used his voice probably the most fearlessly of like anybody I know. But I will say also, just in general, metal as a genre, I think vocals have always had a tendency to be mixed slightly further back. I think metal musicians in general have always kind of had the idea of just vocals aren't like the commanding force of the song. It really is like the riffage and the rhythmic syncopation amongst the group that carries the energy more so than the vocals.
I'm all for unconventional vocal styles, and I agree. Yeah, definitely. You know, especially older metal albums, the vocals were mixed far back. And two, you know, I think Aaron Turner has progressed a lot as vocalist because I should listen to the later ISIS albums, but I've listened to Sumac a bit, and I really like what he does vocally on those albums. But just a lot of the songs, those early songs, for ISIS, it wasn't like he was doing. For me, it didn't sound like it was like. It sounded like the intent of the vocals was weird, and it just like wasn't adding anything like artistically or conceptual to the songs. That's all I think. But maybe I got to give it another chance.
And I think you're probably right in a lot of ways. Like when they were making those specifically the first two records, Celestial and Oceanic, I think he really wasn't sure what his role as a vocalist should be. Mm-hmm. He was like not sure where he belonged. He's not sure necessarily. I mean, it's not like people think about this. Like some people get coached on like vocal phrasing, or some people just obsessively think about vocal phrasing. But for ISIS, and I think for a lot of metal bands, it was really just like, we have the whole entire song ready to go and we're ready to record the whole song. Let's add some vocals to it. Yeah, and it's just like whatever comes. And, you know, a lot of the words, there's a lot of phrases that have some succinct meaning, but a lot of the like overall themes of the songs aren't necessarily connected. But then Oceanic, I did just want to mention briefly, because I don't know if you ever read any of the backstory about this album, and I'm probably going to fuck up some of the lore, but basically
I'll pull up the Wikipedia.
It's about a dude who falls in love with a woman, and he's convinced that they're soulmates, and then things happen. He finds out that she is his sister, and then unable to like cope with the sorrow of the heartbreak, he just drowns himself in the ocean. And that's like what the whole album is about. So
that's some Pete Townsend's rock opera shit. I didn't realize it was conceptual to that extent.
So yeah, all the songs carry that theme throughout. And so like when you're listening to the last song on the record, it's literally like there's a huge riff that is supposedly him going into the ocean, and then there's like a very big like melodic outro that is just like builds an intensity and is like, in my opinion, just super beautiful, very just emotive outro of the song. And that's like his soul being freed or whatever bullshit. So yeah, I think by album 2, Aaron Turner really figures out like, okay, I want to be a vocalist who like tells a story, or like at least uses phraseology that connects to human emotion, but he's still trying to figure out like, where exactly do I sing? How do I scream? Those things are all still kind of being figured out. But then on album 3, Panopticon, I think at that point, that's when you start to hear Aaron Turner being like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to do what I want to do with my voice. And I don't really care how that plays out. Cause there's a lot of like off key singing. There's a lot of like half singing and just like yelling that's not screaming on Panopticon. It's kind of like him starting to, I think, really feel himself as a front man. Mm-hmm. And then you have Absence of Truth, where I think in every way they're trying to step away from everything that they've done up to that point. And so he's trying to reinvent himself as a vocalist on that album in a lot of ways and figure out how to be like a more conventional singer. And yeah, his voice isn't like a good voice. It's not like, he doesn't sound like fucking Alicia Keys, you know, he's not like fucking a fantastic vocalist by any means. But I think what is endearing about the record is just that he's obviously standing true to like his efforts and his convictions on it. And it's not like any of it's half-assed, like Lars Ulrich's parts.
Just had to throw that in, didn't you? You spiteful bastard.
Fuck Lars Ulrich. But yeah, so anyway, and then obviously we've talked about Sumac a little bit, but I think personally, yeah, Aaron Turner's vocals and his singing and his scream. I don't think he does any real singing on Sumac, but his screaming and like the melodic like whining and like pinchy vocals that he does are like some of the most like haunting and like crazy and like ethereal things that I've ever heard in my life. And every time I hear it, it's just like, fuck, man. Like I don't even know where to reach. I don't know how to reach far enough into myself to like find a sound like that or like a feeling like that even behind a sound. And I've seen Sumac live a bunch of times, and every time I see him live, he recreates like those exact sounds to a T live.
That's sick.
And you can feel the emotional intensity behind what he's doing. And it's not just bullshit screaming. It's like, you know, the dude's really actually trying to tell a story and emote some true feeling through what he's doing as a frontman, even though, yeah, you can't really understand any of the words. You have to like go read the words and be like, oh shit, that's what he's saying. Like, oh, that's crazy.
It is so rad and like primal and cool to just convey emotions and ideas through like guttural sounds, like through screams. And
Sumac has this album called Love and Shadow, where when they played the album, I saw it live, and at the end, he literally was like, all these songs are about peace and love and self-acceptance and learning to love yourself for who you are. And it's just like, wow, like, you know, I weirdly, the music's super heavy and ethereal, but I weirdly feel exactly that way after I listen to Sumac. I'm always just like uplifted as fuck, which I know for a lot of people, that's not the vibe. It's just kind of like, whoa, this is crazy. But it's, I think, like a fine wine. It just takes time and age to like really get to a place where you can appreciate it. And I would say anyone that thinks that they can't enjoy metal or like progressive music that's like this, I 100% think that you absolutely can. And you just have to give it like time and attention and understand that like the attention to detail and like the foresight and the thought that's put into songs like these is like pretty much unlike the level of thought that's put into any other type of music that's made, in my opinion.
Yeah. Respect. That's cool, man. Yeah. You got me into Sumac a while ago just through mentioning them, and I will listen to them semi-often, and I'd love to go see a show with you next time they're coming through.
Do you have Bandcamp?
Yeah, I have Bandcamp.
Did you ever listen to the album May You Be Held?
No.
Or the song? You should
Is that just a Bandcamp exclusive?
Yeah, it's not on other streamers, unfortunately, but you should listen to the song May You Be Held by, it's fucking crazy. It's so good. And then you get into songs with Sumac where it's like, you know, some of the ISIS songs are like, 7-8 minutes long. And you're like, whoa, this is a long song. The Sumac songs are like 17 to 20 minutes long on average. Mm-hmm. There's usually only like 4 of them on a record. And it's like, those songs kind of feel, not all of them feel short, but there's a couple of them where it's like, wow, that definitely didn't feel like 20 minutes. Some of them feels like a fucking lifetime from start to finish. And there's some Sumac songs where it's like half of it is just noise. But fucking sign me up. I love it. I couldn't really even explain why the noise element of it gets me so excited, but it's just like the idea that that instruments are created to like pretty much do the opposite of what they do on all those noise sections. It just makes me feel like so excited. It's like the next way to push an instrument forward is to try to find all the ways to do like very, very uncomfortable things with it. And like as a drummer, I forget the dude's name. I can't remember his last name. His first name is Nick, but the drummer of Sumac, I think he's a fantastic example of a musician who's tried to like find ways to push an instrument forward in ways that no one's ever thought to do it before. Cause it's like, how do you, as a drummer, fill like a 4 to 5 minute section of a song with drum presence that is in no way rhythmic or cohesive or linear? Like, and also, how do you do it in a way that doesn't just seem like it's complete just noise? Like it's still very much a performance. He still chooses what he's doing. And again, when they do it live, it's like he does exactly the same things, which is what blows me away the most about it. It's not just like the dude just hitting all of the cymbals at the same time. It's like if he hit that cymbal at that time on the recording, he's hitting it that time during the live performance. And it's like really, really crazy to think about.
It's Nick
the amount of
Yakushin.
memory. Yes. And he's an absolutely amazing drummer.
You touched on this a little bit, but how impactful was the drumming on the ISIS albums for you?
So I didn't necessarily discover ISIS when I was still being super heavily influenced by drummers, if that makes sense. I discovered ISIS when I was in early high school. So it was like I was pretty established in what I wanted to do behind the drum kit at that point, but I was still definitely like learning from what I was listening to and trying to pick up on things that other people were doing. And so when I listened to a lot of the ISIS drums, my impressions were just like, I can't play that. But over time with practice, I could play somewhat similarly. And I think the main two things that I really took away from Aaron Harris and his drumming were his cymbal work, because he'll do a lot of accent notes that line up with what guitar players are doing, like a little dome tap when a guitar is playing a high note on a melody. He did a lot of that, and he also just did he would play a lot of different cymbals. Like he would use one ride for part of a song and a different ride for a different part of the same song, which, you know, most drummers, they'll pick one ride and they'll use it for like their whole career. But like I have 3 ride cymbals set up right now for one band. And I think that's really because of Aaron Harris and his like very intensive cymbal work. And I love cymbals now. I don't know if I necessarily had the same appreciation that I did for them before ISIS. And then the other thing is just his tom work is incredible. He'll play toms, like a lot of the fills that he does on toms, he'll just do single stroke rolls, but they will be like out of time from what the rest of the song is. So they will feel like slightly out of place, but they're obviously still super linear because he's starting and finishing them at the same time. And I think that is a super unique approach to doing tom fills. And I've tried to take that from a lot of his parts into like what I do, where like if we're doing something straight, I'll try to throw in a lot more of a triplet fill, quarter note triplet, something goofy. And if we're doing something that's in like a 6 or, you know, like an 8, whatever, or sorry, a 6/8 or like a 9/8, I'll try to throw like quarters or 8ths or like duples into that as fills, because it draws more juxtaposition to the fill, and it, I think, calls attention to like what the drummer's doing and the motion behind the kit. It really makes you feel like you can tell the dude's moving around the full kit that way. And then when he's not doing like tom related fills, he'll do a lot of just like tom grooves where it's just like a running pulse around the whole kit, and it involves toms a lot. I think Danny Carey from Tool does that a lot too, but Aaron Harris, I think, does it way more tastefully, and he does it in a way that complements the track a lot more, as opposed to Danny Carey, who I think is just doing it to try to get like a bunch of notes into a cool groove. So yeah, I think those are the main two things. Like the way that he approached writing drums on songs was just very different from all other metal drummers and just drummers in general at the time. So I think he's super important. I don't think there would necessarily be like that much of an experimentation element to like progressive drumming if it wasn't for dudes like Aaron Harris. So
yeah, man, that's cool. You're a good drummer, you know that?
No.
You are.
I'm not like
and
those guys.
I enjoy hearing you talk about the drums. You're obviously a student of it.
I very much enjoy listening to you talk about everything. So guitar,
Thanks,
YouTube, fucking yeah.
Good thing we
friends.
enjoy hearing each other talk because we are doing that as one of our ventures.
Yeah, we do that a lot.
Yeah. Do you have anything left to say on ISIS? Because I'm about to throw a surprise question at you that I really wanted to bring up in this episode and change the topic slightly.
Okay. No, I don't think so. The only other thing I really wanted to say about this in general is that, yes, I feel you and I understand you when you say that it can be boring, it can be drony, it can go on. But I think, yeah, those are the same reasons why we talk a lot of shit about like jam bands and like some of the more like just like stream of consciousness based music. But I think the exception that ISIS has to the rest of all that shit is just that there's still intention behind like everything they do. None of the like open sections are like huge jams where they're just like, let's just see what happens. It's like everything is tactical and figured out. And I know that you appreciate that in music as a musician. So I would definitely encourage you to try to stick it out. And I would love to continue to talk to you about ISIS over the next coming months and years, because I think at some point, maybe not for a while, but at some point in the future, you'll be like, hey man, I fucking get it now. Like this is great shit.
I could definitely see myself getting there pretty quickly, and I will continue to listen to them for sure.
Fuck yeah. All right.
All right. Here's my surprise question.
Okay.
And I've been wanting to ask this to you for a while and just keep forgetting, but this is
I will suck your dick on camera.
Too bad we're virtual tonight, dude.
I know.
Tomorrow. Okay. Here's my question. Do you like Deftones?
You don't know?
No.
Oh my God, bro. Well, okay. Do you?
Yeah.
Do you love the Deftones?
No, I don't love them, but
okay.
And I get sick of them pretty quickly. But,
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I do like Deftones.
Okay. I love the Deftones.
Okay. I thought that would be your answer.
Deftones fan. And actually, when they did their what's the album called? Ohms. They did their Ohms tour in 2022 or 2021. It was one of the last couple of years. I went and saw them at Ball Arena, and I stood in like a nosebleed seat, one of the worst seats in the whole fucking place, and I headbanged nonstop to the entire show the whole time. I was like slightly debilitated for a couple days because of how hard I went and how much fun I had from the very, very back of the venue. And yeah, they're fucking great. I think like the thing about them that I perhaps get sick of the quickest is just the slightly whiny tendency that Chino's vocals have. Sorry, Chino. Yeah. I love Chino as a vocalist, but just hearing him be like
exactly
for a whole album, it can be a little tiring.
I would say the same thing likely about a lot of bands that have a very idiosyncratic vocalists, especially, that like it's easy to get sick of because it is such a style and you understand what they're doing.
And
but
Chino's Chino's got a beautiful voice, and I think he knows that he does, and I think he very much wants to be like a traditional vocal performance, where it's like he wants to squeeze the most out of his
he does insane stuff with his voice.
He really does. And his ability to go from a very clean, kind of gentle melodic vocal into a very intense scream, like on a dime, is pretty impressive. I think like mentioning Thrice again for the second time in this episode, fuck yeah, Thrice. Dustin Kensrue is very similar in the sense where he can go from like a pretty gentle vocal to like a very harsh scream on like a very quick change. And I think that there's not too many vocalists that really do that. It's like, are you going to sing for the whole song or are you going to scream for the whole song? Chino definitely does a lot of both throughout, and I think he uses the screams in a very powerful way. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to scream here because I want to. It's like, if I need to scream here, I'm going to scream here because that's what the song needs.
Do you have a favorite Deftones album?
Okay, so this is where things get weird for me because I tend to, with bands where the fan base really likes their older shit a lot more, I tend to be the guy that likes the newer shit a lot more.
Yeah.
So I think I mean, honestly, Koi no Yokan is probably my favorite Deftones album, and that's like 2011, so it's not super new. But Gore, I would say Gore would maybe also be my favorite, and that's second from their most recent. And I think the reason why I would even say that it might be my favorite is just because it's the most different. They take the most chances on it, and I think it has like the most interesting performance from all the members of all the Deftones records. And then on Ohms, they kind of go back to being like, okay, we're going to make a Deftones record now. And I think Ohms is great too. I love Ohms. But yeah, there's something about Koi no Yokan where it's really just like its own encapsulation of a new metal record. It's like, yeah, they made it for themselves. It's a concept record that I think holds true to its own concept, and it's not really found again on any of the Deftones records too much. And I think the artwork for it is fucking sick. I love the artwork on Koi no Yokan.
I've not spent any time with that album, so I will check that out. However, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
I've been spending a lot of time, really, is how I would classify it lately, with Around the Fur and White Pony. And actually, I listened to Adrenaline like a week ago because I never listened to it. It's a good album too.
Great.
Yeah, great album. I think White Pony, if I was hard pressed to pick a favorite of the Deftones I'm familiar with, that'd be my favorite album. But,
well, it sounds like you got to go explore some newer Deftones and then let me know. I will say, if we're talking like classic, obviously White Pony is classic in just the music universe in general. It's not just like a Deftones classic. It's like universally a critically acclaimed classic record. And I love White Pony. I went back and had a moment with White Pony, I think like 2 years ago, where I was listening to it almost every day, and it holds up. Like it really does just stand true as like a very solid record. I
remember my dad had White Pony on CD, which says a lot about it.
That's crazy.
My dad owned it.
Why would your dad have a Deftones record? Holy shit. Yeah, good for him. Yeah, I think I could probably do a whole episode on Deftones. I'd have to do a little bit of research, but
we should.
I could talk for a whole episode on Deftones.
Because I've been very interested in Deftones as of late, like last several months. So that'd be cool to go deeper into it. Any closing remarks on 90s / early 2000s metal, my brother?
No, man. I think I'm all conversated out. I'm pretty sure I talked for like 85% of that. So sorry for everyone that had to hear it.
No, you were much more articulate than I could have been on anything related to 90s metal. I pretty much just got and said it's pretty sick to work out to Pantera and Metallica. Here you go, Julian. Actually talk about a band you know something about. Yeah, no, it was enjoyable. And
well, you taught me all about Oasis, so I had to return the favor.
Well, we'll definitely have more Oasis episodes, so don't you worry, brother.
I'm sure we will.
And before I forget, I added it to a little spreadsheet, but talking about Aaron Turner, kind of taking up the position as frontman and vocalist without really wanting to, it reminded me of New Order, where, after Joy Division, Ian Curtis died and no one wanted to, the band stayed together and wanted to be something else, but no one wanted to sing. And Bernard Sumner ended up taking on the role of lead vocalist and developed one of the most iconic voices, I would say, of, new wave or maybe even rock in general. And it was because he had no idea how to sing and just formed his voice to the music they were playing. And no one else could do it like him. So I hear that, I think, with Aaron Turner, especially in Sumac.
Definitely.
Just like a dude who learned how to sing to his music.
And those are the vocalists that I think tend to cling to the most. Like, I mean, you have singers even like Tom York, who is an incredible singer and he's great at using his voice, but he's definitely never been conventional. And he's always been less concerned about what people are expecting and just more concerned about what he can do that is innovative. And I think that, Aaron Turner, that's also the reason why I love Aaron Turner. And it's the reason why, it's the reason why I love the vocalists for like all the bands that I'm in right now. Like, I don't want like someone who just will sound like literally every other person to be singing. I want it to be someone with an actual unique voice that has real character. And if Aaron Turner is on any project whatsoever, no matter if it's Sumac, Old Man Gloom, collaborating with a different band, or just, dropping in, like, I'll always know, oh, fuck, that's Aaron Turner. And now my other buddy Colin, will also always hit me up and be like, Aaron Turner's on this song. And it's like 100% of the time, oh yeah, that's definitely Aaron Turner.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. All right, cool, man. Well, shout out Aaron Turner. I guess that's how we'll close the sode.
He also does tattoos and they're pretty sick. So Aaron Turner, if you're listening, give me a tattoo, please. I'll pay full price for it, obviously. I'll let you do whatever you want. Just give it to me, baby.
All right, brother. Have a good night.
Sounds good. You too, my friends.
All right. Bye.
Much love.